What's up, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. This is Fantasy Football 201, an advice channel to help you win a fantasy football championship. Today's video, we are going to be doing Week 13 strategy, waiver wire pickups, players to drop, players to hold, and general strategy to help you in these last few weeks to win your fantasy football championships. So, if you're interested in more content like this, please consider checking out my channel. I make a wide variety of fantasy football videos. I've been making it all season, so check it out in my description if you're interested. And I also make a lot of other videos too, like song covers, song reactions, etc. So check it out. Consider subscribing to my channel if you're interested in more content like that. So we are now at the point in the season where you got to make some difficult decisions on certain players and certain teams. So I'm going to focus on this video a lot of trends in terms of what I notice on teams and how you can make smart decisions on the waiver wires and these last minute pickups that you're trying to make in your last push before the playoffs to set yourself up for success. Also, in terms of trades, not going to really focus too much on trades for this video. If you want to see more information about the trades that you want to make at the conclusion of the season, take a look at my Week 12 video. I'm going to post it in the description below. That has all you need to know in terms of the strength of schedule for certain teams that bodes well for their playoff chances, guys that you want to try to trade for, trade away, etc. So check out that information. Pretty much all of it applies to this video, bearing any injuries that happened from a week ago until this week. So for Week 13, the bye teams, or the teams on a bye, Cleveland, Green Bay, Tennessee, and Carolina. So this is going to dictate some of your decisions on drops. So we'll go right into our drops, some of those players that you're not sure if you want to try to cut. This is what I would personally do as a fantasy football manager. Drops at the quarterback position. So the guys going on a bye like Ryan Tannehill, Cam Newton, Baker Mayfield, those can all be dropped to me. And especially in one quarterback leagues, those are all guys that are, they're heading into their bye, so they're not going to help you this week if you need that playoff push. But they're also the way they've generally been performing on the season, not so much Cam Newton, but Cam Newton's job is in question for this upcoming week. But Tannehill and Baker Mayfield have really not given you that elite upside at all this season, and they've particularly been struggling of late. I don't think you need to hold on to any of the three. Another guy that I would consider dropping as well, and a lot of this, this is really if you're in more shallower leagues, but Teddy Bridgewater. A kind of a very similar situation to Tannehill and Mayfield. He really does not give you as much upside as you might anticipate. Throughout the season, he has been a guy that has only given you a few games above 20 points this season. A lot of that is also rushing touchdown dependent, but he doesn't really rush that often, so it's a relatively misleading stat. He's also got a shin injury going up against Kansas City, so you could be tempted into the Kansas City matchup, because Kansas City as a whole this season has not been a good defense. But they have played very well of late, and they just shut down Dak Prescott the week before their bye. So that is a huge consideration, and if Teddy Bridgewater is not going into this game 100%, I would make a strong case that you do not need him on your roster, because he does not have a particularly strong schedule the rest of the way as well. Running backs. So in general, running backs, you do not want to drop them, but there are a select few that I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to go into this a little more detail later with a few teams, but Houston running backs, I just want to highlight them, Rex Burkhead and David Johnson. So they had the best matchup for running backs this past week against the Jets, and they both did absolutely nothing with it. Those guys cannot be rostered at all. You can definitely drop anybody on the Texans. It's just a mess. Buffalo very much the same way, because they become a three-headed committee that just doesn't show progress of anything. Nyheim Hines is another one I would consider dropping, because aside from two great games, he's been very bad in fantasy football this season. And I don't think that you need to continue to hold on to him given those numbers. Unless you own Jonathan Taylor, but I'm still not 100% confident that he would just assume the whole Jonathan Taylor role, because he's a very different type of running back. And then lastly, so this is being recorded before the Washington-Seattle game, but depending on how Alex Collins does, if he plays another game where he only rushes for 40 yards, one reception, etc., then you need to just cut him because he's had all the opportunity the last few weeks, not taking advantage of it. Wide receivers. So Courtland Sutton. This one is tough because I did have high hopes for Sutton, and he did look very good at one time this season. But Courtland Sutton over the last 4 games has given you less than 6 full PPR points. This is all when Jerry Jeudy has come back. So Courtland Sutton at this point is proving to be somebody that is not reliable for fantasy football to close the season. They've also got some tough matchups to include Las Vegas and the Los Angeles Chargers in the playoffs, and Cincinnati in Week 15, also part of their fantasy football playoffs, much improved as well. I would cut ties with Courtland Sutton. Kenny Golladay, just a huge bust on the season, has not stood out at all. You just need to part ways with him. Manuel Sanders is another one I would definitely consider cutting too. He did show some flashes this season, but over the last few games when more of the receivers have been healthy and in games where they've been competitive, they've not needed to rely on Emmanuel Sanders. So it's really just a dart throw, and I would not want to take that chance if I could put him in my roster, and him to just totally destroy your score. Marvin Jones. So this is another very difficult drop decision, but it's also very frustrating too because he should be the wide receiver 1 on this team. But Marvin Jones, since their bye week in Week 7, he has given you 9.2 points at best in full PPR formats. He's also not surpassed 52 yards since the bye. So you do have a few good games earlier this season. So it is definitely somebody that I would not advocate for you dropping necessarily. But if you need a spot, I think that he's shown a trend where he can hurt you if you start him. And you do not want to be, unless you think that somebody is going to significantly change because of the matchups they have, I would not put him out there. And especially Trevor Lawrence struggling, Marvin Jones definitely a drop candidate. And then 3 easier ones for me. Robbie Anderson, also been a bust. Jamison Crowder and Corey Davis, because the entire New York Jets receiving core, aside from Elijah Mitchell, has very limited upside. Tight ends. So Noah Fant, Tyler Higbee, Dallas Goedert. Those are all 3 guys that were drafted in the middle rounds this season that have been very disappointing. They've had some good games from time to time, but they've shown you that there is no pattern of consistency. And at this point in the season, you've got to look for some better options, or just go the streaming route, leave them on waivers, maybe pick them up if they've got a good matchup, but they do not need to be rostered week to week. And especially coming off games like this, especially in the case of Dallas Goedert, who has been massively disappointing since Zach Ertz left, you can just cut ties with him. And then defenses to close out my drops, Carolina. So Carolina, number 4 ranked defense on the season, but their defense has, one, they played some very easy matchups at the beginning of the season that padded their stats. 2, they are really getting hurt by the offense. And I'm going to talk about the offense in a little bit, but the offense is putting them in a position where the defense is not going to be successful. And over the next few weeks, they've got some very difficult matchups to include Buffalo, Tampa Bay. It's just, to me, this is going to be a very rough closing stretch for the Carolina Panthers. Holds. So these are guys I would not recommend you drop. Do not panic on these players. Quarterback, I want to start with 2 guys that are kind of in that 2 quarterback fringe. So they may be rostered, may not be. Kirk Cousins and Jimmy G. Those are both guys that have been very consistent for the most part this season, but they also do not give you that ceiling. And they also are coming off of relatively poor games. But I would still hold on to them if you can. Kirk Cousins has got Detroit in Week 13, so that should give him some more upside. And then Jimmy G, his playoff schedule is one of the best among quarterbacks. He's got Atlanta in Week 15, Tennessee in Week 16, and then Houston in Week 17, which is one of the best defenses you can go up against. Them and the Jets are definitely some of the worst defenses out there. So I would definitely not. If you really need a spot, if you're in a 1 quarterback league, then possibly. But these are guys that are on the fringe of the top 12 that are good enough that you can definitely justify holding them. And then in very shallow leagues, you may be asking yourself, should I drop Russell Wilson? He's played very poorly. And again, this is being recorded before the Monday Night Football game. But you are not going to find guys on waivers that give you the upside that Russell Wilson does. So you would feel very bad if you were a fantasy football manager and you drop Russell Wilson to pick up a fringe streaming option, and then Russell Wilson comes back late in the season because he's healthy and goes off. Because you're just not going to find... Russell Wilson has got top 5 quarterback upside when he's healthy. So somebody like that, you've just got to hold on your bench and hope that he can turn it around. Do not drop him for somebody else to take advantage of. Running backs. Very similar situation, Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook, a lot of people might be panic dropping him because the injury looked bad. He got carted off. They think he may be done. But the news just came out today that he's day-to-day. I really do not think he's going to play in week 13 against Detroit because it's Detroit. But all that being said, Dalvin Cook is somebody that even if he does miss a couple weeks and he's not going to be healthy until the playoffs or he goes on the short-term IR, he's somebody you still want to hold on to because you cannot find guys with that level of upside on waivers. Except for one that I'm going to talk about, who's conveniently on the same team. But I'll get into that in a little bit. Miles Sanders is another one I would not drop. Also dealt with an injury in Week 12. Has been in and out a lot this season, so very disappointing for managers that probably drafted him highly. But you still want to hold on to him because, again, he presents the most upside in this backfield. Granted, it's not going to be consistent, but you don't want to put somebody like that on waivers, especially for the point of just preventing somebody else from taking advantage of him in that game that he does go off. Ty Johnson, I would not give up on either. He did have a rough game, very poorly utilized by Zach Wilson in comparison to guys like Mike White, where he's thrived. But Ty Johnson has the most upside of all the Jets running backs. The other two are traps. I will get into them in a little bit. I would try to hold the Tennessee running backs if you can on their bye. Even Jerry McNichols, I would still try to hold on to if you can, because those Tennessee running backs, they have upside. They've shown it at times this season. Foreman, Hilliard, and McNichols are all guys that have shown flashes this season. I would not feel comfortable putting any of them on waivers. And then in very shallow leagues, Saquon Barkley, David Montgomery, and Kareem Hunt all coming back from injuries and had some poor games. But still, don't panic. They're going to have a lot of opportunity moving forward. Hold at wide receivers. Mike Williams, in very shallow leagues, you may be wondering if you should cut him. Even though he has not played particularly well the past few weeks and been very inconsistent, you cannot afford to put somebody like that on waivers in the event that he does go off. Because he has shown stretches where he is amazing. And he's still heavily targeted by Justin Herbert. It's just not connecting all the time. So I would definitely hold Mike Williams, but I would not feel comfortable starting him at this time. Jerry Jeudy, same thing. I would not start him, but you want to hold somebody like that who's shown upside and is the top receiving option on Denver. And then Elijah Moore, very much the same thing. And then I say that because he's got upside of a very young receiver, a rookie receiver, who is standing out among his team. So do not put somebody like that on waivers because he has shown that with the right quarterback play, he can go off. Hold at tight end. So these are three guys, Kyle Pitts, George Kittle, and Mike Gesicki, that are all performing pretty well this season, or they have the reputation of somebody that can perform well, but they all are coming off some very rough stretches the past few games. George Kittle in particular I want to highlight because he has not been good this season. A lot of that is due to injury, but he has still got more upside than the majority of guys on waivers. So I would not just drop George Kittle and put him out there. You unfortunately just have to hold him. Same with the other two, Kyle Pitts and Mike Gesicki. And then holds for defenses, Los Angeles Rams and the Dallas Cowboys, both coming off of poor games this past week in Week 12, but they've got some great matchups in Week 13. So before I get into waivers, I want to talk some strategies that are helpful for you going into the closing stretch of the fantasy football season. I've got some strategies that I talked about on my channel earlier to include kicker strategy and how kickers are a great placeholder position where you do not need to roster a kicker until the end of the week. You can pick up a kicker at the last minute. Gauge, especially with running backs. I personally, as much as I can, I try to wait on picking up a kicker until the end of the week because if injury news comes out, certain players, especially at the running back position, the handcuff could become a starter that week. So, but more information on that in my video earlier that's going to be posted in the description below. I also talk about handcuffs quite a bit. And especially this past week, if you do not have some of these best running backs in the league's handcuffed, like let's say you own Dalvin Cook and you didn't handcuff Alexander Mattison, as I've been telling you the entire season, then I don't know what to tell you. But if you have an elite running back, anybody that's within the top 15, then you need to own their backup because that backup will be more valuable to you than anybody that you can pick up on waivers that is a fringe. Like, would you rather, like, I'm just trying to think of a hypothetical off the top of my head, but would you rather have somebody like Jeff Wilson? Let's say you own Elijah Mitchell and you have Jeff Wilson Jr., who's not been anything great necessarily, but you have the option of him or somebody like Brandon Bolden, who is a very limited upside player who only thrives in situations where New England is blowing out the New York Jets. Well, I would much rather have Jeff Wilson in the event of Elijah Mitchell getting injured. So, because this is a team that loves to run the ball. Jeff Wilson Jr. went off last year. So even if you never play him, you're always got security with that backfield. Another great example of that is the Minnesota situation. You've got, even in the case of like Zeke Elliott, Tony Pollard, even though he's likely rostered by other players. If you own DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams should definitely be rostered. Got examples like that. So if there's more description on that in particular in my video earlier, so check it out if you're interested. But for this week, I want to focus on situations that you want to avoid just based on trends throughout the season. So I'm going to go through 5 general scenarios of things that you want to avoid based on what I've observed so far in fantasy football. And when I say this, I personally would avoid situations where you just roster them all together. But there is arguments to be made that rostering some of these players may be beneficial. I personally would not start any of these situations, though. So the number one situation I want to talk about, Buffalo and Houston running backs. Those guys should not be rostered at all, in my opinion, but they should definitely not be started. There is some chance, and I say that because there is some odd chance, especially with Houston, that they get a guy from the practice squad who suddenly goes off in the playoffs. And then, but because you still got a couple weeks left and anything can happen. But the general trend that I've seen this season is that they are a committee. They also are a very bad offensive line that just has no success running the football. So as long as they have these low upside aging veterans like Rex Burkhead, David Johnson, etc., it's not going to change. So all I'm saying is unless there's any situation where a rookie comes in we haven't seen his potential yet, avoid that situation. Another situation to avoid, so wide receivers for all 4 of these teams. Tennessee, New York Giants, Atlanta, and Detroit. And I caveat that with Tennessee where A.J. Brown and Julio Jones, when they come back healthy, they're definitely playable. But all the other guys in Tennessee, I would not take a chance starting. That includes Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, who I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But, you got the Giants. All these guys have shown flashes this season, but they've all been dealing with soft tissue injuries and have not been healthy. So, and we haven't seen when they're all back who is the actual number one. So just avoid the whole situation. You can't take that risk in the playoffs. Atlanta, you got Russell Gage, but Russell Gage has a pattern of putting up a 20-point game like he did this past week and giving you an absolute 0. You cannot afford that risk. Do not take a chance putting him out there. And then Detroit, who has just been a revolving door of wide receivers that just come in and then show flash at one point in time and then just disappear entirely. You want to avoid that too. Third situation that you want to avoid for Cleveland, anybody that is not a running back for the Cleveland Browns. You might be saying, oh, well, Jarvis Landry just had a 15-point PPR game. But Jarvis Landry has been wildly inconsistent this whole season. Cleveland is a team that focuses on running the football, ball control. They are not a fantasy producing team unless you have Nick Chubb or Kareem Hunt or Dearness Johnson in the case of the other two being absent. And that has been the case the entire season. So do not take chances on starting Donovan Peoples-Jones because it's just too risky in my opinion. Philadelphia, all flex players other than Devontae Smith. So Devonta Smith has been good at times this season, but he is incredibly risky. That being said, he does give you that top 10, top 5 upside that comes more often than not, and he is still the number 1 receiver. So there is times where you want to potentially take advantage of that chance to start him. I generally would say no, though, but definitely all the other guys on this team. Maybe I just talked Miles Sanders, and I would hold him on your bench for running backs, but all the other guys like Boston Scott, Jordan Howard, Jalen Reagor, Dallas Goedert, I would just not roster any of them whatsoever. That's personally what I would do. Just avoid the whole situation because Jalen Hurts, when he has a game like he did this past week, can just destroy the whole offense. Fourth situation, the fifth situation, final one, kind of a hot take, but the entire Carolina team. The Carolina team at this point, you cannot feel confident starting any of these players because they are just so limited by the quarterback play right now. They're really considering going from Cam Newton to PJ Walker, who is just, and the only hope, if I were them, I would leave Cam Newton in because he gives you the upside that PJ Walker just doesn't even have. But even if they do decide to go to PJ Walker, then the whole offense is going to be limited from a fantasy perspective. Even DJ Moore, I would not feel comfortable starting. A lot of these other guys on the fringe, though, I would cut. So now let's go to the waiver wires. And these are the key guys I want to focus on that you want to consider picking up for this week. Quarterback. So the number 1 guy that I would pick up if he's out there is Taysom Hill. The rumors coming out today are that he's practicing with the first team and likely to start against Dallas. Taysom Hill, we know he's limited as a quarterback in terms of his ability to run NFL-style offense, but he is a very good fantasy football asset. We look at his 4 games from last year when he was a starter. 23 points, 17 points, 27 points, and 22 points. So he's averaging over 20 points a game, and he's very consistent for the most part. That's because he gives you that rushing value. He's going to be a threat to run for a touchdown around the goal line, to even be involved in passing plays, potentially where they gadget play, throw it to him, because that's the type of player that he is. And that is an excellent asset to have, especially in 2 quarterback leagues where you just need to plug in a streamer that you can be very safe and confident with. This is a potential league-winning asset in 2 quarterback leagues. You want to make sure you roster him with this news. Other guys to pick up as well. Justin Fields, very much a stash as well, and I say that because he has shown some very good flashes at times, but he is inconsistent. He does have some nice matchups, though, in the playoffs to include Seattle and the Giants in Week 16 and 17, so I do feel confident that we could see progression if he is healthy, that he could be a decent flyer to throw out there. But again, this is deep quarterback leagues. I would not worry about this at this time if you're in a 1 quarterback league with 12 teams or less. Tua is a great streaming option, especially to stash for the playoffs. He's got the Jets in Week 15, the Saints in Week 16, and the Tennessee Titans in Week 17. So that's about as good as you can get in terms of playoff matchups. And he has been a very good quarterback at times this season. He also has some limitations that is highly publicized, but I do like his playoff schedule, especially the way some of those defenses are trending of late. Carson Wentz, likely roster, but in very shallow leagues, he's a good option to consider for this week because he's got Houston. And then consider Tyrod Taylor as well on the opposite side. This is more of a deeper league option, but Tyrod Taylor gives you some good value running the football. He's actually not really making a lot of turnovers since the bye, has been a pretty effective game manager for them. So with that rushing floor and his lack of making mistakes, he is a very safe option. Running backs. So this is the real heavy hitters for this week. Running back waivers, this is definitely where you want to cash in. The number 1 guy I would go after is Alexander Mattison. I mentioned earlier that nobody has the upside of Dalvin Cook out there on waivers except for 1 running back who's on his own team, and that's Alexander Mattison. If you did not handcuff Alexander Mattison handcuff Dalvin Cook with Mattison, and he's still out there. This is the guy you want to spend anything on that you have, because if Dalvin Cook is out for a lengthy period of time, Alexander Mattison has shown elite running back production in the 2 games that he started. Alexander, I believe he put up over 25 full PPR points in both games, but he is heavily involved, has the volume, has the team that sets him up in a position to be successful running the football. This is just a great situation to have if he's out there. And even I'm not 100% confident. They list him right now as day-to-day, but I'm not 100% confident that Dalvin Cook will be 100% the rest of the season. So Alexander Mattison is definitely somebody that if he's out there, you want to prioritize. Tony Pollard is likely rostered as well, but very much a similar theme. Go after these high-valued handcuffs that are out there where their starting running back is dealing with injuries. So Tony Pollard, good example of that. Zeke Elliott potentially might get shut down. No word on what exactly they're going to do with him yet. Number 3 guy I would go after is Jamal Williams. Jamal Williams, similar situation to Pollard, but DeAndre Swift dealing with an injury. They may be likely to just shut Swift down the rest of the season because Detroit is not competitive. And Jamal Williams has shown flashes, not so much with Detroit, but with Green Bay. So great flyer to take advantage of. You probably don't have to spend a lot for because he has not been particularly much of a standout this season, but a great option to consider. Lower on the priority because they're going into bye, but the next one that I would consider after that is Darren Hilliard. I believe I keep mispronouncing his first name, so I apologize if I said it wrong. But he looked very good against New England. Granted, he did have a 68-yard touchdown run that kind of skewed his stats a little bit, but he looks to be the PPR option for them. And Tennessee is going to rely on the running backs in the event that A.J. Brown and Julio Jones remain out, because they're going to operate more in the short ball control game, kind of similar to Cleveland to a degree. My only concern with him is what his role will be when Jerry McNichols comes back, because that's what McNichols was already doing even when Henry was healthy and they were without A.J. Brown and Julio earlier, I believe in week 4 or 5. McNichols had a very good game. So that's a potential concern, but you do like the production that he showed in this game, especially compared to the rest of the team, that this could be a trend moving forward. And then lower priority, I'm going to put the Panthers running back. So Chuba Hubbard, Amir Abdullah. These are going to be the guys that are likely most hyped, maybe aside from Mattison, but these guys are most likely hyped a little higher than some of those other guys I mentioned because they're filling Christian McCaffrey's shoes. But we've already seen when Christian McCaffrey was out, Chuba Hubbard was really not that much of a standout. He didn't kill you necessarily, but this is a team that is very limited offensively, as I already talked about. And I think Hubbard and Abdullah are just going to eat up each other's touches, and it's just going to be an entire mess. So I am not super savvy about picking up these two, especially going into their bye week where you're not even going to use them the first week that you spend fab on them. So I personally would try to avoid it. If you have any other handcuffs out there, as I mentioned earlier, pick them up to your own elite running back. That includes like Austin Eckler, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, guys like that have not gotten injured, pick up their handcuff. Also see if Derrick Henry's out there. Rumors are that he's going to come back potentially week 16. So if you're set for the playoffs, that is a potential league winning right there if somebody dropped him. And then guys to avoid, Matt Brieda, Boston Scott, Andrew Walters, I believe that's what his first name is, for the Jets, got a touchdown, but that was just not sustainable. And Tevin Coleman, a very limited upside running back for the Jets. As I mentioned earlier, Ty Johnson is the one to have from them. Do not go chasing the most recent production from those two. Wide receivers. If Brandon Ayuk is out there for some reason, he is the number one. Deebo Samuel down with an injury now, and Ayuk has played well, and he's actually been getting the majority of the targets the past 2 weeks. So that is the guy that you want to try to get for San Francisco, and out there on waivers for wide receivers if he's there. The number 2 guy that I like, Odell Beckham Jr. Again, likely roster because of his name, but if he is out there, I was very encouraged by these signs with the Rams and what he did against the Packers. He's going to have some high-scoring matchups to close the season as well, and has a very clear void for the number 2 wide receiver on this team, number 2 receiving option as well. So definitely consider that as well. And then number 3, probably the safest play if he is out there, Darnell Mooney. Of those, if most likely available, that is going to be safe. I think Ayuik is very safe as well, but Mooney is also a very good player to pick up. He's out there, possibly dropped after their bye week, or not rostered for whatever reason over Thanksgiving. So Darnell Mooney, great player to consider picking up. Very involved in the Bears offense, emerging as their number 1 receiver. Other guys to consider as well, more of fringe players. So Kendrick Bourne, likely going to be the most hyped receiver out there. He's been inconsistent this season, but he has shown some good signs the past 3 weeks. 24 points, 8 points, and 23 points the past 3 weeks. So multiple 20-point games, you're starting to notice a trend. I am not 100% confident in it because it's the Patriots and they often spread the ball around. But you do like that he is emerging as Mac Jones' number 1 option. But they also play Buffalo this week. But again, he's not a bad guy to just stash. I don't know if I would start him, but he is interesting, especially as he's trending in the right direction. And then other guys to consider too. Van Jefferson, same team, the Rams, been all kind of up and down too, but he is getting some involvement that has shown to be a trend. He's not a bad receiver to throw in at this point in the season based on his production. T.Y. Hilton has been pretty involved with the Colts when he's healthy. And then Nico Collins, who got the same number of targets as Brandon Cooks. If the Texans decide that they want to start evaluating for the future, don't necessarily need Brandon Cooks to head out there, Nico Collins could be a great stash for somebody late in the playoffs who could emerge, but not a guy you want to start at all at this time. And then a lot of tricks out there to include Jarvis Landry, Russell Gage. I already talked about those two. Deshaun Jackson, he had a great game against Dallas, but he is the definition of inconsistent. Josh Reynolds, another Detroit wide receiver who has been recently added from Tennessee, and he had 3 for 70 yards and a touchdown, but on 5 targets. You can make the argument that he's getting more involved in this offense, but you want to see consistency before you roster him, in my opinion. Marquez Valdes-Scantling, yes, he has done a little bit more the past 2 games, but he is a guy that I just do not feel comfortable starting at all, and I know this because of years of seeing how this guy can just burn people because he just throws up a straight 0 when you least expect it. And then Westbrook-Ikhine, kind of already talked about him too, but going into his bye week, I really do not feel that you have to pick him up. He had a touchdown this game, but he also had 2 catches. So, yeah. Tight ends. So, a tight end I really like who, if he's out there on waivers, is a very interesting ad, Foster Moreau. He has been a good tight end for the Raiders, and Darren Waller might miss quite a few weeks. Still to be determined how long he will be out, currently listed week to week. But Foster Moreau, in the games where Darren Waller did not play this season, was actually not a bad tight end. So you like the fact that he's been involved in the team already with Waller there. He's shown flashes of potential with Waller out. Now Waller will be out for quite a bit of time. This is a great tight end. If you need a tight end, this is the number 1 guy I would pick up if he's out there. Also see if Zach Ertz is out there too, by the way. He might have been dropped. Likely not, but Arizona coming off a bye, he could be available too. Cole Kmet is interesting in deep leagues because he got 11 targets from Andy Dalton. Remains to be seen how long Fields will be out for, but if Andy Dalton is the starter, then Cole Kmet getting 11 targets is definitely something that I want to potentially chase with potential quarterback rapport with his tight ends. And then defenses. So I'm going to... Well, real quick for tight ends to avoid, Jack Doyle. He had a great game, number 1 tight end on the week right now, but that is not sustainable. Do not chase Jack Doyle after 1 game that he had this season that was good. And then defenses. So, going to give you a couple defenses to consider. So, Rams and Dallas had bad weeks this past week, but the Rams got Jacksonville. The Dallas Cowboys have the Saints, which have been looking very poor offensively the last few weeks. So those are guys that if somebody drops them for some reason because they're disappointed with Week 12 performance, pick them up. Miami is a great pickup, especially for the playoffs. Miami has the Giants in Week 13, so that's a great matchup. And then they've got the Jets in Week 15, which we all know how Zach Wilson plays. So this is a great defense that if they're out there, they've been playing a lot better of late, living up to that potential that we thought they could be. Past 4 weeks, they've had 18, 17, 4, and 25. So not a bad performance by that defense there. And then other teams to consider, Minnesota has got Detroit in Week 13. Philadelphia's got the Jets. And then San Francisco's got Seattle, which we'll see how Seattle does tonight. New Orleans and Denver are both interesting defenses to consider for Week 14 because they're playing the Jets and Detroit respectively. And then in Week 15, I already talked Miami's got the Jets, but then Arizona might be out there because of their bye, but they have Detroit in Week 15. So that is a great smash play for the first round of the playoffs. Kickers to consider to close out this video. So Greg Zuerlein, over 50% available for Dallas. Missed a few weeks because of injury, but he's back, and Dallas, high explosive offense, a lot of potential there. Jason Sanders has got that kicker formula that I like to talk about where he is going to have opportunity because the offense is going to get into the red zone but not score. Jason Sanders been pretty good the past few weeks. And then Daniel Carlson, over 50% available, but he is the number 2 kicker on the season. A lot of people dropped him after that rough stretch for the Raiders offense, but they've got some decent matchups coming up, especially Washington in Week 13 where they should have better performances for him. And then Evan McPherson for the Cincinnati Bengals has had 2 great performances the past 2 weeks, 21 points and 13 points, and he's got the Chargers in Week 13 in what should be a high-scoring game. So those are all guys that I like at the kicker position. Comment if you have any questions for Week 13. If I get at least 10 comments, I will make a start-sit video by the weekend. So if you know people that need fantasy football advice or want to have some questions answered for the end of the season, please recommend this channel, share it with your friends, tell your significant other or whatever, and then I will make a video if I get enough comments. So 10 comments, and then I will put out a start-sit video answering those questions. So that's all I got for this video. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.